Welcome, friends. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, coming to you in a special joint production with NewsBud.com. Today, we're going to be talking to Sibel Edmonds and Spiros Skouras about the topic that has taken over the news headlines over the weekend, and that is the attempted Turkish coup that took place on Friday and was quickly quelled, but certainly has created a stir and is going to have geopolitical ramifications in the coming weeks and months. For sure. It's an interesting situation, especially because we were talking about it 6 or 7 months ago here on the Corbett Report and on BoilingFrogsPost.com with Sibel. I wrote a newsletter editorial back in the beginning of December of 2015. Is Erdogan being set up for a NATO-backed coup? And then a couple of weeks later, Sibel and I talked about that very possibility in an interview that we recorded towards the end of December. Is it inevitable that Erdogan is being targeted here and that he's going to go down? And if so, how does that play out?
Because they finally got to the point where they divided the country so much internally and the opposition. So he does not enjoy what he enjoyed 2-3 years ago. He still had the majority support. That support has been diminished, is far below 50% now. And he's going to be replaced with someone much worse. I can guarantee you that, because history repeats itself in these countries, with someone like his predecessors. And I don't know if it's going to be a direct military coup, but the CHP party that are secularists, they, behind the scenes, some of the powerful factions within CHP, they have formed alliance with Gülen movement, which is mind-boggling. I'm talking about the most secularist party forming alliance with the mullah, who is absolutely advocating for fundamentalism, Fethullah Gülen. I never thought I would see such day that these two will join forces, and so you're going to see something like that, and but things are going to get worse. We're going to have more terror events in Turkey. It's going to happen, and it's going to come from many sides. There's going to be the Kurdish sides, then of course all the stuff that they are blaming on ISIS. It's going to be messier, but he's going, and this is not any particular good news for the Turkish people. Economy is really going to sink in Turkey. It's already sinking, but it's really going to sink. And I'm telling you, and I'm mark my word here, they are going to end up with someone much worse than Erdogan. I'm not defending Erdogan. Is he involved, he and his son, in some corruption? Of course, I don't doubt that. Did they obey the United States order in creating ISIS? Okay, arming ISIS. This was, where do you think they got the arms? And everything that goes there is from the NATO, from the United States. Yes, they did, but it's not going to be. Things are not going to get better for Turkey, unfortunately.
And Sibel Edmonds was even more explicit in an interview that she recorded with Lou Rockwell a little later on.
You're looking at a country that is about to economically collapse anytime now. And your question was on Erdogan. And when you ask, well, what's happening and what's going to happen with Erdogan, that's going to be the major factor determining what's going to happen with Erdogan's administration. They have formed this date on November 7th or 20th for the election. But if this economic collapse happens before then, let's say by October, which is highly likely that it will take place, then you may look at the big major possibility of a period of pure chaos and violence, followed by possibly another military coup in Turkey, which will be the Operation Gladio and the rulers basically taking back the Turkish government, which took place, Turkish military coup, which is always backed and done with the United States, by the United States. We had it in 1981. We had it in 1997. The pretext for that would be the country is collapsing. We have all this violence. The economy has collapsed. So this is time for a military coup to reestablish order and maintain order. So that would be, if the collapse occurred before the coming election, which is highly likely, we are looking at high possibility of another coup in Turkey, unfortunately.
So perhaps this is not surprising, but it is interesting that the way this all played out. So now we're going to have to try to sort out what is actually happening in Turkey, what just took place, what is about to take place, and who are the real players here? Who was really behind what happened in Turkey over the weekend, and who is really in control at this point? It seems to be Erdogan and his faction have regained control, but we need to understand these events in a bit greater context. So let's bring in Sibel Edmonds to this conversation so we can talk about these events in more detail. All right, we are working obviously with a moving news story, so by the time that you guys see this, who knows where this story will have moved on to. But at this point, we know that Erdogan is pointing a finger at Fethullah Gülen, who, again, should be very familiar to viewers of my conversations with Sibel over the years. And Gülen, of course, is saying, not me, Erdogan probably staged this himself. There are interesting elements pointing to, well, probably both of those possibilities being at least somewhat true, but I want to get Sibel's take on this. Sibel, let's start by breaking down the events of Friday. Your thoughts on the way this played out and how it either goes with or goes against the narrative that we're being told about this being some sort of spontaneous uprising by some angry military personnel.
Well, thank you, James. As you just mentioned, the story and the facts and the storyline keeps evolving, and it has changed to a certain degree since Friday, but as we see, it is changing on hourly basis. And just a quick note, a lot of people have been making comments about, oh, I'm an oracle and I predicted looking at my crystal balls. But if they did listen to that interview we had, to that discussion, they would see that we basically connected the dots. And that was a pretty much educated guess, educated prediction of where things were being led to. As you know, they started in 2012, 2013 with those famous Taksim Square protests were mostly designed by Gülen. And when we say Gülen, you're looking at an 80-year-old senile guy. He's just a figurehead. He is stationed here in the United States. He's been in the United States since 1997. He lives in several castles. His castles are protected by security guard, Apache helicopters. His net worth for his NGOs and foundations for this Mullah Gülen is estimated around 22 to 28 billion dollars. He owns and operates this terrorist, this Mullah Gülen, the largest charter school chain inside the United States. And together with his CIA handlers, he's been establishing hundreds of mosques in Central Asia, in Caucasus, even in the African continent, in Indonesia. And he's been living in the United States while wanted in Turkey as a terrorist since 1997, okay? So those protests were quashed. And after that, we saw this escalation, you and I, with all the propaganda during the elections, as the elections neared. So that was another attempt by the CIA, NATO, and Gülen faction to sway the public opinion and basically defeat or take Erdogan off power. That didn't succeed, despite all the trials, all the mainstream media propaganda, especially here in the United States, but to a certain degree with the English language version of some Turkish mainstream media, with operatives who are linked directly to Gülen and the CIA here, and all the think tanks that you and I have been talking about. And that was when I predicted that since the other attempts failed, those would have been some sort of soft coup. The next step would be attempting a coup, a military coup.